The third strategy you can use for getting out of knee pain when lunging is to really improve your hip hinging ability. Now, this is a very broad topic and could involve a lot of other things, but it's really important. Basically, for almost any lower body exercise you're doing, right? So anything for your legs where your feet are on the ground, and that's a lot of different things. And this applies to daily activities as well, not just exercise. You really do need to understand how to hinge at your hips. It saves your back, it saves your knees, it's kind of a big deal. So if you struggle with a hip hinge, spend time getting good at it. And you could spend time even with like bridging, right? So basically, laying down, bridging, something like that. Get good at that, because the hip hinge there is very similar to what we're going to talk about with everything else, but you have to get good at hinging through your hips. If you can't, this stuff is always going to be difficult, but then your daily activities, climbing stairs, sitting and standing, and anything that requires you to have all your weight on one leg and to bend, you're going to struggle. So get good at your hip hinge. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's a lot to go over, but basically the things you want to think about with a lunge is your heel and your hip, okay? So if I'm standing here, my left leg's forward, I'm going to push through my heel and I'm going to initiate through my hip. And you see what that does to my torso is it brings me slightly forward, okay? So heel, hip. So if I start to move and my heel comes off the ground, no good. That means that means I stopped moving through my hip. So what you'll find is that if you start to shift on your toe, you really don't, your spine will probably bend, your knee will bend, but your hip really stops contributing. So what I would encourage you to do is go slow and then push back through the hip and keep pushing your butt back as you lower down. It'll feel weird at first, but you really want to kind of exaggerate the hip motion. Now, what you have to watch out for is kind of what we talked about in the beginning, was putting too much pressure on the back foot, right? So I'm not shifting my weight back. That's different. I'm hinging at my hip. When you hinge at the hip, it allows my spine position here and here to be exactly the same. My spine doesn't have to move, and that's another important part. If you start looking at low back pain and issues there, being able to keep a good sort of neutral or braced spine position. So focus on, get your heel on the ground, and just start to cut back. Even if you start your lunge like that, just start through a small range of motion, get used to the hip hinge, and if you can find a small range of motion that doesn't hurt, that's a good place to start. Whether it's deloaded or regular, start there, and then slowly add more depth, and work on your hip hinge, and don't be afraid to hold on to something. Grab a foam roller, grab a chair if you're at home, if you're at a gym, go next to a bench. If you're at home, go next to the couch, next to your bed. It doesn't matter. Use something to give you a little bit of help as you're learning the movement. Then as you become more proficient, take away the support and then still try to maintain your technique.